On my 78th birthday, I woke to find my hair and eyebrows shaved clean, a hilarious joke by my daughter-in-law, Serafina. She then canceled my party, calling my appearance embarrassing. My son said nothing, but as I looked at my stranger's reflection, a quiet resolve hardened. They thought they'd won, but they only ignited a fire. This story is just beginning. Like, share, and tell me where you were listening from. The soft morning light filtering through the lace curtains of my bedroom on my 78th birthday was usually a comforting sight. Today, however, it seemed to highlight an unsettling chill that crept across my scalp, a sensation I couldn't immediately place. I reached a hand up, my fingers brushing against something unexpectedly smooth, utterly devoid of the familiar texture of my silver hair. A shiver that had nothing to do with the cool air ran down my spine. My heart began to pound with a slow, heavy dread. Pushing myself upright, I shuffled towards the antique full-length mirror that stood in the corner of my room, its ornate frame a silent witness to decades of my reflections. What I saw stopped me cold. Staring back was not the Eleanor I knew, with her soft silver waves and distinct, if thinning, eyebrows. Instead, a ghostly, unfamiliar face with wide, terrified eyes looked out from a completely bare head. My hair, every single strand, was gone. My eyebrows, too, erased without a trace, leaving my face looking alien, exposed, and grotesque. A choked gasp escaped my lips, quickly escalating into a wave of pure, unadulterated panic. Who was this stranger in my mirror? My hands flew to my scalp, confirming the horrifying reality. It was smooth, shorn, utterly bald. My breath hitched in my throat, a primal scream threatening to erupt, but getting stuck somewhere deep inside. This couldn't be happening. Not to me. Not on my birthday. "Arthur!" I croaked, my voice a thin, reedy whisper that quickly gained volume as terror seized me. "Arthur, come here!" Now! My son, Arthur, appeared in the doorway moments later, his face already etched with a familiar guilt rather than shock. His eyes, usually quick to meet mine, darted around the room, avoiding my gaze, settling on anything but my disfigured reflection. He stood awkwardly, hands shoved into his pockets, a telltale sign of his discomfort and, I suspected, his prior knowledge. He didn't ask what was wrong, nor did he gasp. He simply looked miserable, confirming my worst fears. Before I could even process Arthur's strange reaction, Serafina, his wife, and my daughter-in-law glided into the room behind him, a saccharine smile plastered across her meticulously made-up face. She held a small, neatly wrapped gift in one hand, her presence radiating an unnerving cheerfulness. "Happy birthday, Eleanor," she chirped, her voice sickeningly sweet, as if she were congratulating me on a wonderful milestone. "Did you like our little joke?" The words hit me like a physical blow. A little joke, the sheer audacity, the cold-blooded cruelty of her confession left me momentarily speechless. My trembling fingers still traced the unnatural smoothness of my scalp. This wasn't a joke, it was a violation. "Joke?" I finally managed to stammer, my voice raspy with disbelief and nascent fury. "Serafina, look at me! My hair, my eyebrows!" Serafina waved a dismissive hand, a tinkling laugh escaping her lips, entirely devoid of warmth. "Oh, Granny, it's just hair. It grows back. And honestly, the look on your face when you woke up must have been absolutely hilarious. Arthur and I were giggling about it all night." My son shifted uncomfortably, his eyes still fixed on the floorboards, a silent testament to his spinelessness. He was a grown man, nearly 50, and yet he stood there letting his wife mock and diminish his own mother. My initial panic began to morph into something colder, harder. This wasn't humor, it was a deliberate act of cruelty, a calculated power play designed to assert dominance. The glint in Serafina's eyes wasn't mirth, it was triumph. She wasn't laughing with me, she was laughing at me, and more disturbingly, over me. My dignity, my sense of self had been stripped away along with my hair. "Serafina," Arthur finally mumbled, his voice barely audible. "Perhaps you went a little too far this time." It was a weak, pathetic attempt at intervention, quickly extinguished by a sharp, silencing glance from Serafina. Her eyes narrowed and Arthur visibly flinched, retreating further into himself. The unspoken threat hung heavy in the air between them, a dynamic I was all too familiar with. "Nonsense, darling," Serafina purred, turning her attention back to me, her smile unwavering. "Eleanor just needs a better sense of humor. Honestly, some people take themselves far too seriously. Your dignity, as you call it, is quite trivial in the grand scheme of things." But the cruelty didn't stop there. Serafina clapped her hands together, a bright, performative gesture. "Well, this presents a bit of a problem, doesn't it? We can hardly have your birthday party today, looking like, well, like that. It would be rather embarrassing for everyone, wouldn't it? I think we should just cancel it." My stomach dropped. The birthday party, the one I had been looking forward to, the one I had helped plan, inviting my few remaining friends and distant relatives. That was it. The true purpose behind this monstrous prank clicked into place with horrifying clarity. This wasn't just about humiliation, it was about isolation. It was about controlling my social life, cutting me off from anyone who might offer comfort or perspective. Arthur, ever the docile husband, chimed in. "Yes, Mother, I suppose Serafina is right. We should postpone it until your hair grows back a bit, perhaps. Then we can have a proper celebration." He offered a weak, conciliatory smile that did little to ease the burning fury within me. A profound sense of defeat washed over me, heavy and suffocating. My breath caught, tears pricking at my eyes. But I refused to let them fall, not in front of them. The raw shame of my appearance, the betrayal, the callous disregard for my feelings, it all threatened to crush me. But then slowly something shifted deep within. The defeat began to harden, transforming into a cold, unwavering determination. This wasn't just a joke or a petty power play. It felt orchestrated, too calculated, too devoid of any genuine human emotion. I sensed something far more sinister at play, something beneath the surface that Serafina was desperate to hide. And in that moment, as they stood there, smug and oblivious to the storm brewing inside me, I made a silent vow. I would uncover the truth. I would understand their motives, their cruel intentions. The investigation, however subtle, would begin the instant Serafina and Arthur left the house, leaving me alone in my violated room, with my unrecognizable reflection and my newfound resolve. Once Arthur and Serafina had departed, leaving the house in an unnatural quiet, I began my grim investigation. The initial shock of my bald head still throbbed, a phantom sensation of vulnerability. I started in my bedroom, meticulously scanning the floor, the sheets, even the rim of the wastebasket. Nothing, not a single strand of my distinctive silver hair was to be found. The absence of evidence was, in itself, damning. This wasn't a spontaneous act of malice. It was calculated, carefully planned, and executed with a chilling precision. They hadn't just shaved my head, they had erased all traces of their crime from my personal space. My suspicion deepened, solidifying the conviction that this was premeditated. My next logical step was the guest bathroom, the one Serafina frequently used during her extended stays. My heart hammered with a mixture of dread and grim determination. If they were so meticulous in my room, perhaps they had been less careful in their own domain. I pushed open the door, my eyes sweeping over the immaculate tiled surfaces. Then my gaze landed on the small, decorative waste bin tucked beside the toilet. Peeking out from beneath a crumpled tissue, almost imperceptible, were several fine, shimmering strands of silver. My silver. A cold wave washed over me. This was it. The violation had taken place not just in my home, but effectively in Serafina's chosen territory, using her tools in her control. It confirmed a chilling realization. I hadn't simply slept through it. I must have been rendered unconscious. The only way such a blatant, brutal act could have occurred without my knowledge or resistance was if I had been drugged. The thought sent a tremor through me, making my bald scalp feel even more exposed, more vulnerable. My mind raced back over the past few days, a blurry montage of Serafina's overly solicitous behavior. Her frequent offers of chamomile tea before bed, always insisting I take just a little sip to help me relax. Her gentle reminders to take my evening medication, often bringing it to me with a glass of water already dissolved. It had all seemed so caring, so thoughtful. Now it reeked of deception. I made my way to the kitchen, my movements stiff, my senses on high alert. The kitchen was Serafina's domain, where she often tinkered with concoctions and wellness drinks. My gaze fell upon the spice rack, a colorful array of jars and tins. Serafina, ever the tidy one, always arranged them alphabetically. As I ran my fingers along the labels, I felt a slight give behind the turmeric jar. I pushed it aside, and there, tucked away, was a small, amber-colored bottle. Diphenhydramine 50 millimilligrams. The label clearly stated, prescribed to Serafina Hayes. The bottle was nearly empty. Diphenhydramine. I knew it as an antihistamine, but in higher doses it was a potent sedative, 50 milligrams. For an elderly person, especially one not accustomed to such a high dose, it would be more than enough to induce a deep, drug-induced sleep bordering on unconsciousness. My blood ran cold. The pieces clicked into place with horrifying precision. Serafina had systematically sedated me, rendering me helpless while she carried out her cruel act. The realization was sickening, turning my stomach with a mixture of fear and righteous anger. This was not merely a prank, it was an assault. Just then, the shrill ring of the landline phone shattered the silence, making me jump. I hesitated, then answered, my voice still shaky. It was Beatrice Davies, my oldest and dearest friend, her voice laced with concern. "Eleanor, darling, are you all right?" Serafina called me earlier, quite frantic. "Said your party was off. Something about you coming down with a highly contagious illness. Is everything all right? You sound a little off." Contagious illness. The lie was so audacious, so utterly baseless. My blood boiled. Serafina wasn't just lying to me. She was weaving an elaborate web of deceit, spinning different manipulative narratives to different people, ensuring my isolation. My own embarrassing appearance to Arthur, a contagious illness to Beatrice. The manipulation was masterful and utterly chilling. After reassuring Beatrice that I was merely feeling a bit under the weather and would call her later, I hung up, my mind racing. There was more to this than just humiliation. Serafina's motives ran deeper. Financial, perhaps. I remembered her occasional veiled questions about my assets, my pension. I moved to my small study where I kept my personal documents. I opened my purse and pulled out my checkbook register. My heart sank. Several recent entries seemed off. The handwriting, though attempting to mimic mine, was slightly bolder, more forceful, lacking the delicate flourish of my own script. There were unexplained withdrawals, larger than my usual expenditures, made out to cash or miscellaneous. But without my bank statements, I couldn't confirm the extent of the damage. Frantically, I searched my desk drawer, where I always kept my monthly bank statements. Empty. Every single one, crucial for tracking transactions, was gone. Serafina had not only drugged me and shaven my head, but she had also been systematically raiding my finances, covering her tracks with terrifying efficiency. The sound of the front door opening, followed by Arthur and Serafina's voices, startled me. They were back. I quickly tucked the diphenhydramine bottle and checkbook register back into their hiding spots, pulling myself together. I needed to appear distraught, defeated, exactly as they expected. I walked back into the living room, affecting a mournful slouch, touching my bald scalp with a feigned whimper. Serafina's eyes, though attempting to convey sympathy, gleamed with barely concealed triumph. "Still upset, Granny? Honestly, it's not the end of the world. We'll reschedule the party when you're feeling more yourself." I nodded miserably, forcing a tear or two to well up, playing the part of the broken old woman. "Yes, Serafina, you're right. Perhaps it's for the best. I don't feel like myself." "Exactly," she exclaimed, relief and satisfaction evident in her voice. "Now Arthur and I are going to pop out for a bit. You just rest, dear. We'll bring you back some soup." As she turned to leave, her hand rose to adjust a stray hair on her own head, and my eyes, now sharper, more observant than ever, caught it. Entangled in the intricate silver chain of her bracelet, a single thin strand of my silver hair glinted in the afternoon light. It was a tiny, damning piece of evidence, a careless victory trophy. My heart hardened further. They thought they had won, but they had merely armed me with fragmented truths, and I was just beginning to put the pieces together. The heavy weight of betrayal settled over me, chilling me to the bone. But beneath it, a nascent strength began to stir. I wouldn't be Serafina's victim. My first step was to reclaim a semblance of my former self, to shed the visible badge of my humiliation. Donning a wide-brimmed hat and oversized sunglasses, I hailed a taxi, directing it to the local beauty supply store. I needed a wig, something to cover the stark reality of my shaved head, to restore some measure of my dignity before I could truly face the world. Inside the store, a young woman with a kind smile, seeing my obvious discomfort, approached me. "Can I help you find something, ma'am?" she asked softly, her gaze lingering for a moment on my covered head with an unspoken understanding. I explained my predicament in hushed tones, omitting the brutal details. She nodded sympathetically, leading me to a quiet corner of the store filled with various styles and shades. With her gentle guidance, I selected a wig of soft silver waves, remarkably similar to my own natural hair. As she carefully fitted it, securing it comfortably, I looked in the mirror. A familiar face, or at least a recognizable approximation, stared back. A flicker of my old self returned, bolstering my resolve. On the way home, a detour was imperative. The financial irregularities I'd glimpsed in my checkbook, the missing bank statements, they screamed for immediate attention. I instructed the driver to take me to my bank. I wouldn't wait for mailed statements or scheduled appointments. I needed to see my accounts right then and there. Entering the familiar lobby, I made my way to the desk of Felicity Green, the branch manager, a kind woman I had known for years. Her eyes, usually so warm, widened slightly as she noticed the scarf I had tied snugly beneath my new wig, making me appear a bit unwell. "Eleanor, it's good to see you, though you look a little under the weather," she said, her brow furrowing with concern. "How can I help you today?" "Felicity," I began, my voice steady despite the tremor in my hands. "I need to review my account activity for the past 6 months. Every transaction." She nodded, her expression growing more serious as she pulled up my records. Together, we scrolled through page after page of transactions. My heart sank deeper with each click. Dozens of unauthorized cash withdrawals stared back at me, small at first, then growing progressively larger, always marked as cash withdrawal, and often occurring on days when Serafina had been particularly attentive, helping me with errands. My eyes caught the dates. They aligned perfectly with the 6-month period Serafina had effectively moved into my home, ostensibly to care for me. Felicity's fingers flew across her calculator. "Eleanor," she said, her voice dropping to a somber tone, "these unauthorized withdrawals alone total $8,400. $8,400. My life savings, accumulated over decades of careful budgeting and hard work, being siphoned away, stealthily, relentlessly." The number was a punch to the gut. "Can we look at the actual withdrawal slips?" I asked, my voice barely a whisper. Felicity, sensing the gravity of the situation, immediately complied, pulling up scanned copies of the slips. I examined them meticulously, my eyes darting between my genuine signature on older slips and the newer ones. The subtle differences were there: a slightly heavier hand, a slight variance in the loop of an E, a faint tremor that wasn't mine. It was a clear forgery attempting to mimic my aging hand. Then I noticed something even more insidious. Some legitimate checks, written by me for small amounts, had been altered. A check for $15 to a local charity had been expertly changed to $150. A $50 grocery bill had become $500. The audacity was breathtaking. Felicity leaned forward, her expression grim. "Eleanor, this isn't just a few mistakes. This appears to be a clear, undeniable case of elder financial abuse. The amounts, the pattern, the forged signatures, it's all textbook." I felt a cold dread spread through me. "How much? Now, how much is left?" I asked, bracing myself. She scrolled further, her lips thinning. "From your primary savings account, which held over $30,000, you now have $12,300. Your checking account is nearly depleted. Over half of my savings gone, decimated." The realization was sickening. Serafina hadn't just humiliated me. She was systematically destroying my financial independence. stripping away my security. Then Felicity hesitated, her gaze troubled. There's something else, Eleanor. A few weeks ago, your daughter-in-law, Serafina, came in. She was inquiring about changing the beneficiaries on your accounts. She mentioned you were having memory problems and that she was trying to get your affairs in order for you. The pieces, once fragmented, snapped together with horrifying clarity. The shaved head, the canceled party, the manufactured contagious illness. It wasn't just about control or petty cruelty. It was about making me appear incompetent, unstable, perhaps even senile. It was a calculated campaign to discredit me, to portray me as incapable of managing my own affairs, paving the way for her to gain full control over my finances, perhaps even a guardianship. The beneficiary change was the ultimate prize. I left the bank that day, not as the defeated, humiliated old woman I had been that morning, but as someone reborn in fury. The copies of the fraudulent transactions, now clutched tightly in my hand, felt like weapons. Serafina's scheme was far grander, far more malicious than I had ever imagined. She wasn't just a thief, she was a predator, systematically dismantling my life, my identity, and my future. A burning determination ignited within me, a fire that would not be quenched. I would stop her. I would expose her. Before she could complete her sinister plan, Serafina Hayes would learn that this old woman, though bald and bruised, was far from broken. I returned home, the wig a comforting weight on my head, the fraudulent bank statements a burning weight in my hand. The house was still empty, offering a temporary reprieve from Serafina's suffocating presence. There was no time to waste. My fury, once a simmering ember, now raged with the intensity of a wildfire. I headed straight for Serafina's room, the place where she felt safe to store her secrets. I systematically began my search, my hands moving with a precise, almost clinical detachment. The drawers of her dresser were my first target. Beneath a stack of neatly folded silk scarves, my fingers brushed against something stiff, a manila folder, tucked away with deliberate care. My heart pounded a frantic rhythm against my ribs as I pulled it out, my eyes scanning the tab. It was unlabeled, a clear sign of its clandestine contents. Opening the folder, I found a trove of chilling documents. Photocopies of my own bank statements, mirroring the ones Felicity had shown me, lay stacked neatly. Beside them were pages filled with Serafina's elegant, looping handwriting, detailed notes on my daily routines, my habits, my medical appointments, even a meticulous inventory of my modest assets. It was a terrifyingly comprehensive profile, a roadmap to my life, created by someone who saw me not as a mother-in-law but as a target. My gaze fell upon a document that sent a fresh wave of icy dread through me. It was a handwritten timeline spanning several months, outlining Serafina's meticulously planned scheme for financial control. Each month had its own column, detailing her actions and anticipated outcomes. The cold, calculated nature of it made my stomach churn. Then I saw it, explicitly laid out in her own hand. The crisis event demonstrate incompetence. Underneath, written with a heavy hand, were the words, "Shave Eleanor's head." And the casual cruelty of it, the clinical detachment with which she had planned to strip me of my dignity, was almost too much to bear. It was a staged incident, designed to make me appear deranged, unstable, incapable of making my own decisions. Further down the timeline, another entry leaped out, "Avoid financial advisor meeting." Next to it, in parentheses, were the words, "Julian Reed." I remembered Julian. He had indeed been trying to schedule a meeting with me for weeks, citing unusual account activity. Serafina had always intercepted his calls, claiming I was too busy or not feeling up to it. The cancellation of my birthday party, initially framed as a consequence of my embarrassing appearance, was now revealed to be a strategic move to prevent me from meeting with Julian and uncovering her fraud. The folder held even more disturbing revelations. A draft letter, purportedly written by Arthur to my doctor, expressed grave concern about my declining mental state, my confusion, and my unpredictable behavior. It painted a picture of a frail, deteriorating old woman, completely out of touch with reality. The implications were horrifying. This wasn't just about money, It was about my autonomy, my mental and physical freedom. And then, the final, most terrifying document, a power of attorney form. It was already filled out, granting Serafina complete, sweeping control over all my finances, my medical decisions, my entire life. Only one thing was missing, my signature. She was preparing to seize everything. My signature was the last hurdle, and she had just created the perfect crisis event to justify obtaining it through coercion or deception. The full scope of her malevolent plan became devastatingly clear. The party's cancellation was not just desired, it was absolutely crucial. My friends, my extended family, Julian Reed, they knew me. They knew my sharp mind, my resilience, my unwavering grip on reality. Their presence would have exposed Serafina's lies, would have contradicted any claims of my mental deterioration. The shaved head was meant to be the evidence, the visual proof of a complete mental breakdown, justifying her taking over my affairs. My hands trembled, not with fear, but with a righteous anger that vibrated through every cell of my body. This was not merely theft. It was an attempt at emotional, psychological, and financial murder. But she had made a critical error. She had underestimated me. I meticulously gathered every piece of incriminating evidence, the photocopies of my bank statements with the forged signatures, the bottle of diphenhydramine, Serafina's chilling timeline, Arthur's draft letter to my doctor, and the unsigned power of attorney form. This was my arsenal. With a newfound clarity, I made a list of crucial phone calls. First, Julian Reed, my financial advisor. My voice, now firm and resolute, would tell him the party was absolutely on. I would ensure his presence. He would see me, not as the frail, confused woman Serafina painted, but as a sharp, aware individual. Next, Clara Hayes, my lawyer. I needed her in a witness form. I needed to ensure everything was legal, undeniable. My voice, though still laced with the residue of betrayal, now carried an unshakable resolve. Serafina Hayes had played her hand, believing she held all the cards. But she had gravely miscalculated. The game was far from over. Don't miss a moment of Eleanor's powerful revenge. Like, share, and subscribe to witness how she turns the tables on her cruel tormentors. The truth is about to unravel in the most dramatic way possible. The moment Arthur and Serafina's car pulled into the driveway, I slipped back into my role, the role of the defeated old woman, emotionally shattered by their cruel joke. I slumped into an armchair in the living room, a hand faintly trembling as it touched my wig-covered head, affecting a mournful sigh as they entered. Their faces, I noted, held a mix of mild concern and smug satisfaction. "How are you feeling, Granny?" Serafina cooed, her voice dripping with an insincere sweetness that now grated on my nerves. She carried a bowl of what appeared to be bland chicken soup. "Arthur and I thought you might like some dinner. You've had quite a day, haven't you?" I nodded weakly, accepting the bowl. "Yes, Serafina, a very disorienting day." I decided to subtly test her, to gauge the depth of her brazenness. I was just thinking, my bank account. It seemed thinner than I remember. "Have you perhaps seen my savings passbook?" Serafina's eyes flickered, a momentary tremor of unease before her mask solidified. "Oh, that? Yes, you mentioned you were having trouble remembering things, so you signed a form giving me access to help manage your finances. Don't you recall, darling? It was all for your own good, of course, to ease your mind." Her words, delivered with a practiced ease, confirmed her deceit. She believed I was already halfway to a state of mental incompetence, ripe for her taking. "Oh," I said, forcing a confused frown. "I suppose I must have. My memory isn't what it used to be." The lie tasted bitter on my tongue, but it was a necessary performance. "I think I'll just go rest before dinner. All this excitement has left me rather tired." Serafina smiled, a triumphant glint in her eyes. "Of course, dear. Take all the time you need. We'll be here." Instead of resting, I retreated to my bedroom, closing the door firmly behind me. I had 2 hours before the party, 2 hours to transform myself from the bewildered victim into the formidable Eleanor Hayes, ready for battle. My first task was to organize my evidence. I retrieved the manila folder from Serafina's dresser, adding my own copies of the fraudulent bank statements, the checkbook register with the forged signatures, and the bottle of diphenhydramine. I hid the folder in my closet, tucked beneath a pile of blankets, where it would be easily accessible but out of sight. Next, I turned my attention to my appearance. I pushed aside the everyday clothes and reached for my elegant navy blue silk dress, a cherished gift from my late husband, Edward, on our 40th wedding anniversary. The fabric, cool and luxurious, rustled as I slipped it on. It was a dress that commanded respect, not pity. Around my neck, I fastened my mother's pearl necklace, a string of lustrous white gems that had graced generations of strong women in my family. Then came the meticulous art of makeup. With a steady hand, I carefully drew in new eyebrows, mirroring their natural arc. I applied a subtle touch of rouge to my cheeks, a hint of color to my lips, and a dab of mascara to my lashes, bringing life back to my face. Finally, I secured my silver wig, arranging the soft waves so they perfectly framed my face, a mirror image of the hair I had lost. I gazed into the mirror, and the transformation was complete. The reflection staring back was not a fragile, confused old woman. It was Eleanor Hayes, poised and resolute, eyes sparkling with an intensity that promised retribution. I was not a victim. I was a force to be reckoned with. At precisely 6 a.m., I heard hushed voices drifting from the kitchen. I moved silently to my bedroom door, cracking it open just enough to listen. It was Serafina, her voice low and urgent, laced with a triumphant undertone. "She's been so strange, Arthur," she whispered, paranoid about her bank accounts, asking about money she supposedly doesn't remember. "It's clearly a rapid decline." Arthur's mumbled response was inaudible, but Serafina continued, "Dr. Morrison is coming tomorrow morning to evaluate her, as we discussed. This will solidify everything. Once he confirms her declining mental state, getting that power of attorney signed will be a formality." My blood ran cold. Dr. Morrison, tomorrow. They were accelerating their plan, believing my crisis event had paved the way. They truly thought they had won. At 6:30 p.m., the distinct chime of the doorbell echoed through the house. Serafina, likely expecting some distant relative or, more likely, no one at all, answered it. A gasp escaped her lips, followed by a strained, "Julian, what a surprise. Is everything all right?" It was Julian Reed, my financial advisor. He stood on the doorstep, looking slightly confused but resolute. "Good evening, Serafina." Julian's voice was calm. "I received a call from Eleanor. She informed me the party was still on and asked me to come." Serafina quickly recovered, her practiced smile firmly back in place. "Oh, Julian, I'm so sorry. Eleanor must be a little confused. She's been quite disoriented today. The party's actually been canceled. Eleanor isn't feeling well, a bit of a senior moment, you know." Her voice was a condescending murmur, meant to dismiss me entirely. It was my cue. I stepped out of my room, my head held high, my blue silk dress flowing gracefully around me. My appearance was a stark contradiction to Serafina's narrative of a confused, disoriented invalid. Julian's eyes widened slightly in surprise, then recognition, a subtle nod of approval passing between us. Serafina's jaw, however, dropped. The color drained from her face, her carefully constructed facade crumbling in an instant. "Julian, darling, you made it!" I exclaimed, my voice clear and strong, completely devoid of any confusion. I moved towards him, offering a warm smile, bypassing Serafina as if she were a mere obstruction. Come in, come in. I was just about to prepare some tea in the kitchen. Perhaps you could join me and we can review those documents I mentioned." The stage was set. The trap was sprung. With a confident stride, I led Julian Reed towards the kitchen, my back to a now utterly speechless Serafina. Her feigned composure had shattered, replaced by a mask of disbelief and dawning horror. Arthur, pale and wide-eyed, stood frozen in the hallway, caught between his wife's crumbling facade and his mother's sudden, powerful presence. As we reached the kitchen, Serafina finally found her voice, a strained, uncertain whisper. "Eleanor, you look different." I turned, offering her a sweet, knowing smile that didn't quite reach my eyes. "Well, darling, I decided a little bad hair day shouldn't ruin my 78th birthday now, should it? Julian, please make yourself comfortable. For the next 30 minutes, with the kitchen door ajar, I laid out my carefully gathered evidence for Julian. The manila folder became a weapon in my hands. I showed him the forged withdrawal slips, meticulously pointing out the subtle discrepancies in the signatures. I presented the copies of the altered checks, demonstrating how a $15 donation became 150, a grocery bill inflated tenfold. I recounted the unauthorized cash withdrawals, correlating them with Serafina's help. Julian, ever the professional, listened intently, his expression darkening with each revelation. When I finished, he pushed his glasses higher on his nose, his voice low and grave. Eleanor, this is a clear and undeniable case of elder financial abuse and fraud. The evidence is overwhelming. We need to contact the authorities immediately. I intend to, Julian, I replied, my voice firm. But first I want the person responsible to confess, publicly. Just as I uttered those words, the doorbell chimed again, and then again. It was 7:00 p.m. My guests, the ones Serafina had so confidently canceled, were beginning to arrive. Confusion, then panic, flickered across Serafina's face as she watched the first familiar faces enter. Arthur, still in a daze, stumbled forward to greet them, his voice a bewildered stammer. My dearest friend, Beatrice Davies, swept in, a vibrant bouquet of flowers in her arms, her eyes immediately finding me. She hugged me tightly. Eleanor, you look wonderful. Serafina told me you were terribly ill, but I just had a feeling. A birthday is a birthday, after all. Close behind Beatrice, Clara Hayes, my lawyer, entered, her usually composed features etched with a grim understanding. Her eyes met mine, a silent acknowledgement passing between us. She carried a small, discreet briefcase. Serafina, now flitting through the growing crowd, was a whirlwind of nervous energy. Arthur, what's happening? Why are they all here? I explicitly told everyone the party was off. She hissed, her voice barely a whisper, but audible to my sharpened senses. Arthur merely shrugged helplessly, thoroughly out of his depth. As more guests arrived, the house slowly transformed from a quiet, tension-filled space into a festive hub, exactly as I had originally planned. The reordered caterers arrived, setting up a delicious spread. Fresh flower arrangements, delivered just moments before, adorned every surface. The scent of roasted chicken and celebratory cheer filled the air. Serafina, trapped in her own web of lies, could only watch, a forced, brittle smile glued to her face. By 8:00 p.m., all the guests were seated around the dining table, a murmur of conversation filling the room. It was time. I stood at the head of the table, holding my wine glass. With a small, deliberate tap, I silenced the room. All eyes turned to me. Thank you all for coming, I began, my voice clear and steady, amplified by the sudden hush. I know many of you received calls canceling this party today, and I want to sincerely apologize for any confusion or inconvenience. I paused, my gaze sweeping across the faces, lingering for a fraction of a second on Serafina, who now sat rigid, her eyes wide with unmasked terror, realizing what was about to unfold. Arthur simply stared at his plate, seemingly willing himself to disappear. I need to share something important with you all, I continued, my voice taking on a more serious tone. This morning on my 78th birthday, I woke up to a rather shocking discovery. My hair and even my eyebrows had been completely shaved off. A collective gasp rippled through the room. Initially, I was told this was merely a joke, a hilarious prank designed to give me a bad hair day. But as the day progressed, I discovered it was part of something far more serious. I reached under the table, my hand finding the manila folder I had discreetly placed there earlier. I pulled it out, holding it up for everyone to see. What I found, after some investigation, was that this joke was in fact a carefully orchestrated component of a much larger, more sinister scheme. A scheme that involved the systematic theft of $8,400 from my bank accounts through forged signatures and altered checks right under my very nose. The room fell into a stunned silence. Faces reflected shock, disbelief, and growing anger. My words hung in the air, heavy with accusation. And, I added, my voice hardening, the shaving of my hair, the attempt to humiliate and isolate me, was intended as visual evidence. Evidence that I was incompetent, that I was losing my mind to justify a plan to seize complete control over my finances, and indeed my entire life. A suffocating silence descended upon the living room, broken only by the faint clinking of cutlery from some forgotten plate. Every single eye was fixed on Serafina, who stood frozen, her face a ghastly white, her carefully constructed world crumbling around her. Her earlier triumph had vanished, replaced by a raw, naked terror. Finally, she managed to speak, her voice a strained, brittle whisper. "Eleanor, what are you saying? This is preposterous. You're clearly having another one of your episodes. You're confused." She pointed an accusatory finger at me, trying to regain control, to spin the narrative back in her favor. "There's no truth to any of this. It's just your imagination running wild." I remained calm, my gaze unwavering. With a deliberate slowness, I opened the manila folder and slid it across the table towards Julian Reed. "Julian, perhaps you could enlighten everyone here with your professional opinion on the contents of this folder." Julian, his expression grave, adjusted his glasses. He meticulously picked up the bank statements and withdrawal slips. "Ladies and gentlemen," he began, his voice cutting through the tension, "Eleanor has presented me with irrefutable evidence of systematic financial fraud. Over the past 6 months, there have been dozens of unauthorized cash withdrawals from her accounts, totaling $8,400. Furthermore, legitimate checks written by Eleanor have been skillfully altered to much higher amounts. The signatures on these fraudulent transactions are clear forgeries." He held up a few samples, allowing everyone to see the subtle but damning differences. A collective gasp swept through the room. My friend, Beatrice, slammed her hand on the table. $8,000? Serafina, how could you do such a thing?" Her voice was laced with outrage. Serafina stumbled backward, clutching at her chest. "No, this is insane. Eleanor is delusional. She's old. She's confused. Arthur, tell them she's not well." She pleaded, her eyes wide, desperate for her husband to be her shield. My gaze locked with Arthur's. "Arthur," I said, my voice cutting through Serafina's frantic pleas. "This morning, when I discovered what had been done, you told me Serafina went a little too far. You didn't seem surprised then, only guilty. Did you know about this prank beforehand?" Arthur's face, already pale, drained of all remaining color. He stammered, his eyes darting between me and Serafina. I knew Serafina thought it would be funny, a joke. She said it would be hilarious, but I swear, Mother, I didn't know anything about the money, not a penny." He wrung his hands, a picture of pathetic cowardice. "So you knew she planned to humiliate me?" I pressed, my voice sharp. "But did you know she planned to drug me, Arthur? Did you know I would be unconscious when she shaved my head?" Clara Hayes, my lawyer, gasped, her hand flying to her mouth. "Drugged? Eleanor, you were drugged?" Her professional demeanor momentarily cracked, replaced by genuine shock. "Yes, Clara," I confirmed, reaching into the folder once more. I pulled out the amber bottle. This was found hidden in Serafina's room. Diphenhydramine 50 milligrams, Serafina's prescription. I handed it to Dr. Alistair Finch, a retired physician and a longtime family friend, who was among the guests. Dr. Finch examined the bottle, his brow furrowed. 50 milligrams of diphenhydramine, he stated, his voice somber. While commonly used as an antihistamine, at this dosage, especially in an elderly person, it acts as a potent sedative, enough to induce a very deep sleep bordering on unconsciousness. Administered unknowingly, it could certainly render someone unresponsive to their surroundings. Serafina tried to edge away from the table, her breath coming in shallow gasps. "This is all circumstantial. You have no proof." She's a confused old woman making wild accusations. "Oh, but I do, Serafina," I said, a dangerous calm in my voice. I pulled out the final, most damning piece of evidence, Serafina's handwritten timeline. "This, dear Serafina, is your own handiwork." I handed the document to Clara Hayes. "Clara, please read this aloud for everyone." Clara took the document, her eyes quickly scanning its contents, her expression turning from shock to utter disbelief, then to controlled fury. She cleared her throat and began to read, her voice resonating through the silent room. "Crisis event demonstrate incompetence. Shave Eleanor's head. Avoid financial advisor meeting, Julian Reed. Phase 2. manipulate public perception, isolate Eleanor through canceled events and false illness narratives. Clara paused, her eyes widening as she continued. Phase 3, mental competency evaluation. Dr. Morrison scheduled. Power of attorney documents prepared. Full financial control by Christmas. A roar of murmurs erupted, a mixture of outrage and horror. Faces turned from Serafina to Arthur, then back to me, trying to comprehend the depth of the betrayal. I looked directly at Serafina, her face now completely devoid of color, her eyes filled with desperation. So, Serafina, I said, my voice low and steady, you didn't just steal my money. You didn't just shave my head as a joke. You meticulously planned to declare me incompetent, to have me institutionalized, and to seize my entire life, my autonomy, my very existence, all for your own selfish gain. Is that correct? Serafina's composure, already shattered, splintered completely. A guttural scream tore from her throat, raw and unhinged. Lies! All lies! You're just a jealous old woman, Eleanor. You can't stand that Arthur loves me more than he ever loved you. You're trying to ruin us. Her face, contorted in a mask of pure rage, bore no resemblance to the demure daughter-in-law she had pretended to be. I ignored her accusations, turning my gaze to Arthur. Arthur, I asked, my voice cutting through Serafina's hysteria, did you know about her plan to declare me incompetent? To have me evaluated? To take away my ability to make my own decisions? Arthur, who had been shrinking in his seat, his head bowed, remained silent for a long, agonizing moment. The tension in the room was palpable, everyone holding their breath. Finally, he lifted his head, tears streaming down his face, his voice a barely audible whisper. She told me you were getting forgetful, Mother, that you needed help, that it was for your own good. She said it was just a way to make sure you were safe, that your money wasn't wasted. He choked back a sob. I wanted to believe her, Mother. I truly wanted to believe her. The admission hung heavy, a testament to his weakness and complicity. Serafina, seeing her last shred of support vanish, fully embraced her monstrous nature. Her rage intensified, her eyes blazing with hatred. You ungrateful old woman, she shrieked, lunging slightly towards me before Arthur instinctively held her back. You're old and stupid. You deserve this. You deserve to lose everything. Everything, Serafina? I challenged, my voice calm, contrasting sharply with her outburst. Even the $8,400 you stole from me? She scoffed, a sneer twisting her lips. You have more money than you know what to do with, you old fool, and you'll die soon anyway. What does it matter? The room fell into a stunned silence. Even Arthur flinched, visibly recoiling from his wife's callous words. The sheer brutality of her statement hung in the air, sickening everyone present. It was Beatrice Davies who broke the silence, her voice trembling with profound outrage. How dare you? Eleanor is a kind, generous woman. To speak to her like that, after everything you've done, Alistair Finch, who had been observing the scene with a physician's detached gravity, stepped forward. What has been described and presented here, he stated, his voice firm, constitutes elder abuse in multiple forms, financial fraud, psychological manipulation, and certainly, given the forced sedation and physical alteration, assault. This is a matter for the authorities. Indeed, Clara Hayes, my lawyer interjected, her voice sharp and decisive. And I've already taken the liberty of informing them. They should be here any moment. As if on cue, the distant wail of sirens grew louder, their flashing blue and red lights painting the windows with an ominous glow. Moments later, 2 police officers, a man and a woman, entered the house, their presence instantly commanding. They took in the tense scene, their trained eyes assessing the terrified Serafina, the weeping Arthur, and the silent, expectant faces of the guests. I calmly rose and walked towards the officers, handing them the manila folder. Officer, I said, my voice steady, all the evidence is in here. Bank statements with forged signatures, altered checks, a bottle of powerful sedatives, and a handwritten timeline detailing a plan to declare me mentally incompetent and seize my assets. Serafina, in a last desperate attempt to cling to her crumbling reality, shrieked. "She's lying. She has dementia. She's making wild accusations. She's old and confused, officer. Please don't listen to her." The male officer, a seasoned veteran, calmly flipped through the folder, his expression hardening with each page. He glanced at Julian Reed, who nodded grimly, confirming the financial fraud. He then looked at Dr. Finch, who affirmed the effects of the sedative. Finally, his gaze settled on Serafina, then back to the timeline, which clearly outlined the crisis event demonstrate incompetence and the plan for full financial control by Christmas. "Serafina Hayes," the officer stated, his voice devoid of emotion, "based on the evidence presented and the testimonies witnessed, I am placing you under arrest for financial fraud and elder abuse." The click of the handcuffs was shockingly loud in the silent room. Serafina gasped, then let out a furious, animalistic snarl, her eyes burning with unadulterated hatred as the female officer gently but firmly guided her wrists together. "You haven't won, Eleanor. You old witch. I'll get out. You'll regret this," she hissed, spitting the words at me as the officers led her away. I stood tall, surrounded by the comforting presence of my friends and my lawyer, a quiet strength emanating from me. I met Serafina's venomous gaze, my eyes holding a flicker of triumph, but mostly a profound sadness for what had been. "I'm not the one leaving here in handcuffs, Serafina," I stated, my voice clear and unwavering, "and I regret nothing." 3 months had passed since that unforgettable birthday. Today I was in my garden pruning my beloved rose bushes, a gentle breeze rustling the short, silvery strands of hair that now framed my face. It was about an inch long, a soft, natural crop that I had come to love. It was stylish, easy to manage, and a constant, quiet reminder of my resilience. The wig still sat in its box, a memento of a battle fought and won, but no longer a necessity. That chaotic evening, after Serafina was taken away in handcuffs, Arthur hadn't left. He stayed, a crumpled figure in the armchair, weeping uncontrollably. Through his tears, he confessed everything. He spoke of Serafina's insidious manipulations, how she had slowly chipped away at his loyalty to me, painting me as a demanding, forgetful old woman. He admitted she convinced him the stolen money was merely an advance on his inheritance, a way to help them, and that the shaved head was simply my desire for a dramatic new look, a harmless prank to lighten my spirits. He knew intellectually that it was wrong, but her psychological hold had been too strong. The legal proceedings moved swiftly. Serafina, faced with the overwhelming evidence I had meticulously gathered, the bank records, the forged documents, the sedative bottle, her own damning timeline, and the numerous witnesses who had heard her confession, had no choice but to plead guilty. She was charged with financial fraud, elder abuse, and assault. The district attorney personally commended me for my meticulous evidence gathering, noting how rare it was for victims of elder abuse to fight back with such clarity and determination, often too ashamed or frightened to speak out. Serafina received a sentence of 2 years in prison. The court also ordered full restitution of $15,700, covering both the stolen funds and additional damages. A 5-year no-contact order was also put in place, ensuring she could never again threaten my peace or safety. Arthur, though not legally implicated in the fraud, faced his own consequences. The shame and guilt had been a profound awakening. He moved out of the house, away from the shadow of Serafina, and secured an honest job. He was slowly, painstakingly rebuilding his independence, piece by painful piece. Our relationship was also on a path of slow, careful reconstruction. He called me regularly, and we now had quiet Sunday dinners, engaging in open, honest conversations, something we hadn't done in years. One evening, over a simple roast chicken, I looked at him, truly looked at him, and said, "Arthur, I forgive you, but I won't forget the hurt, and I hope you never forget the lessons learned." He nodded, tears welling in his eyes. "I understand, Mother, and I promise I won't. I see you now. I really see you. You're not just my mother. You're a truly strong woman." It was the most heartfelt thing he had said to me in decades. I had also taken full control of my finances, learning online banking and setting up robust alerts, ensuring that no one ever again could exploit my trust or vulnerability. I had updated my will, not to disinherit Arthur, but to put in place safeguards that would protect him from future manipulation, a decision he understood and accepted as a necessary measure for his own long-term well-being. Beatrice Davies had become an even closer friend, a constant source of laughter and support. We now embarked on small adventures, weekend trips to explore charming coastal towns or historical landmarks, enjoying a newfound freedom that had been denied to us for too long. On a particularly lovely trip to Savannah, as we strolled through the historic squares, Beatrice turned to me, a thoughtful smile on her face. "You know, Eleanor," she said, "Serafina, in her twisted way, actually did you a favor. She made you realize just how immense your strength truly is." And she was right. I was not a victim. I was a survivor, a fighter, a force to be reckoned with, as I had defiantly told myself in the mirror. I embraced this new chapter of my life with a joyous vigor, filling my days with art classes, gardening, and lively discussions with my friends. The experience, though harrowing, had stripped away complacency, revealing a core of steel I hadn't known I possessed. Tonight I was hosting a small dinner, not for my birthday, but simply to gather the people who mattered most. My hair was short, my eyes were clear, and my spirit was strong. We would raise a toast not just to my survival, but to unwavering resilience, to the courage to fight back, and to the profound truth that even at 78, life was still full of unexpected turns, and that justice, though sometimes delayed, was always worth fighting for.